Howdy, Hans.
Hi, Jeremy.
There we go. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep.
Oh, rock solid, man.
Yeah.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, shall we just jump right into it?
Yeah, why not?
All
Yep.
right. Cool. Yeah. So first things first, we'll do a little bit of a check-in / introduction. So the three questions I'm always interested in kicking things off have to do with who are you, right? So what part of your story are you presencing in sort of here and now? What are what are we interested in exploring together? So, what's alive or relevant, or, what are you curious about right now? And what makes that topic in particular important to you? Help give me a little bit of feel, a little bit of context. So if you can answer those, I'll do my damnedest to sort of reflect you back, and then I'll answer the same three questions, and you'll do your damnedest to sort of give me what was salient or stood out to you, and make sure we don't miss anything too crucial. And then we'll just take a minute or so for silence to sort of ground and land in this space together. And, then we'll see where the Logos takes us.
All right. Shall I kick it off?
Yeah, please.
Who am I? Interesting one.
Yeah, start light, right?
Yeah, no, it's like, that's part of why am I here. If I look past my ego, which I think I have managed to do, then I'm just part of everything. I am really part of everything, just an expression of the whole, a piece of the circle, the great circle of life. But that expression in this reality is called Hans Schokkenbroek. And in that sense, I have, on my path of finding out who am I, decided that I would like to, I like to help others. What makes me happy is helping others. If I really strip it down to the essence, then that's what I really love to do. And in search of that, how do I do that? Coming from a petroleum engineering side, technical university, Delft, supposedly high IQ, blah, blah, blah. I came to water. Everything is water. All life depends on water. So the best way of helping this planet and everything that's part of her, including us, is by focusing on water. So that's, in a professional sense, that's what I focus on, is restoring the balance of water by using natural technologies. So that's short answer on who am I.
Right.
Then the topic, I actually had question marks. Love to keep things open. There's so much to talk about. But then I that's part of being, truly being. Just let it flow and be, rather than having a specific thing you want to fix or thing you want to focus on. No, just rely on your energy, rely on your inner guidance, and be. So maybe it's about being. What does that entail? I got triggered by change, the gospel of change. Why do you want to change? What's the essence of changing? Why would you change? And related to that is tribal versus the modern prevailing look at life. They are, as many things in life are, there are opposites. They are, everything in life is dual. So those are the three things that, apart from the question marks, came up.
Cool.
And number three, maybe being is the essence of life, is the meaning of life, is to learn to be your unique self, which is, again, for me, just an expression of the whole. But you've been brought here with a unique set of skills, with unique expressions. In tribal, they talk about your unique medicine, and maybe it's about bringing that unique medicine to the benefit of the tribe. The Hopi have a very interesting saying that if you don't fully use your medicine, then you are actually stealing from the tribe. You are withholding your unique properties for the benefit of the whole. So those are the three. Intense. Well, you can make things intense or you can make things light. It's all up to you.
Sure. Yeah. So what I noticed is it that brings up a lot. And so there's a lot of gray area, I think, in between questions 2 and 3 in this context, right? What do we want to explore, and why are those things important? Are really bound up. So maybe just to try and reflect a little bit, Hans, what I dig so much is how you sort of bring in this sort of elephantness that I always have when I answer the same question of who am I, right? Which is like, man, I don't fucking know. Like, hey, I am vast. I contain multitudes. Like, who am I? Like, that's such a, I mean, in what level or layer or context are we going to describe, right? This super local one, or human being here on planet Earth, or this thing that is very much inseparable from all of totality, right? And yet, right, at the same time, there is a very specific instance that is this version of I that is in the here and now, right? And so as you bring in this sort of version of I, right, these things that are important to you are helping in water, which I think are, which really strike me, especially this idea, to maybe later, this seems like maybe an appropriate time. I have a very meaningful experience where I was in Sedona, Arizona, which I don't know if you know is a place very filled with hippies, due to its reputation or feel or vibe or all of the above as a sort of energy vortex. It's got a really interesting vibe. I mean, it's a place in the desert in Nevada, Arizona, and it's a valley that has a river running through it, and is just surrounded by these massive red rock formations, right? And I remember I was sitting in this cave, actually, very close to the river itself, down in this valley, overlooking the valley somehow. And I just had this sensation, how do I tell? Maybe whenever I look at the sky, I notice this sort of crawling sensation when I engage in like the largest panorama view. But that's almost only when I look at the sky. It sort of has an aliveness that, for whatever reason, I can see. But when I was there in Sedona, as I looked at the earth itself, it had that same aliveness. And there was a sensation that what I was seeing in that aliveness was actually the path that water takes. And there was this real sensation that, so water is life. Like, these things are inseparable in some way. So that, as you bring up water, right, this story sort of comes back and becomes very salient in my memory, right? And
beautiful.
Yeah. all of the sensation of like that, whoa, that sort of that mind being blown experience as something becomes suddenly clear in a very significant way. And then as far as what do we explore here together, right? In this version of Hans that is brings the water and brings the help. And sounds like you have this connection to the Hopi people as well. I'm very curious what we can explore as you describe this duality and this question of change and also the juxtaposition between, I think, between indigenous and modern culture, and what is there to sort of learn and go from there. Yeah, a lot of good things in there. So did I miss anything that was like super salient or really relevant that you feel like, yeah, this I wanted to sort of double click on?
No, I think that's yeah, that sort of sums it up. We're getting direction by interacting. So
Cool. Yeah, that's how it works, right? The flow, right? Yeah, the water just flows. All right, so who am I, right? So Jeremy, maybe for anybody who watches this after, it's good to give them a little bit of context. So Hans, we don't really know each other particularly well. We just met a couple of weeks ago. We're undergoing we're part of a mastermind group hosted by Dare to Imagine, Vera and Gwendol are hosting us and a group of 8 or 9 other people on a bit of an adventure. So to introduce myself to you, who am I, right? Well, I am someone who has a pretty high degree of agency. That I have a really strong bias towards action, which makes it, on one hand, really, really easy to go and sort of do, and can make it really challenging to sort of sit on my hands and practice patience and wait and watch and observe and sort of see how things evolve. Um, I'm often showing up in the tape of the thing that I'm trying to observe, right? Poking things around, and this creates this sort of sense of entanglement where I'm not sure what is the thing. How much influence am I exerting on this thing that I'm trying to pay attention to? And what I'm sort of trying to learn and experiment is also how can I be more rooted in center, right? In sort of my essence, or just centered as I act, and not be too keyed in on the environment around me, and yet be very connected to that environment, right? I feel I often have this bias where I'm sort of leaned in and looking and sort of pushing forward, right? My vision is a driving force for me, right? I have most of my connection to the world is through the visual realm, right? Because that's where the mind likes to be, right? What it can see, and what's real, and what it can observe. And it's and so, like, right in the here and now, like, so how do I come back to center, and instead of getting too lean far forward over my feet, how can I continue to move in a way in which brings the rest of my body with me and doesn't get so caught up in this vision of the future, but is still very much connected to the things that are going on around me. So I like that for me. What do I want to explore? I've got lots of question marks too, right? I think we've got a lot of good stuff to cover, and maybe to start revealing a little bit about why, especially this element of change, is so important to me. I think change is fundamental for me, right? I think it's not there's very cliche, change is the only thing that's constant, and I think much more than that. I think changes the underlying fabric that is the universe, right? Is this continual thing that is going from one form to another form, very similar to water that is always flowing, even when it looks like it's fixed and into one place in time. That, you know, if you zoom out to another gradient of perspective, that thing that looks fixed is also flowing and becoming something else, always sort of in the process. So, you know, why would I want to change? I can't imagine. Uh, Now, there's two threads that open up in that question. One is I can't imagine not being in, like, being existing and not being a part of that process. And the more I can sort of line up what this individual version of myself wants with what is sort of happening and unfolding with whatever the universe, however you want to describe it, with whatever reality wants, you know, I notice the better I tend to feel and sort of be. So if I can line up my individual sort of wants, wishes, and desires, the stories I tell myself about the world, with what is actually unfolding in the world, then that feels like a really good recipe for me.
All right. Last one is intriguing.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure if I get that one. So what I'm getting is that you are someone who's driven by action, by doing, difficulty in having the patience to observe things without engaging with whatever you are observing. And you're looking for being more rooted in that you know, learning to become more balanced in that sense, where you are capable of observing without interacting, but at the same time you're still interacting because you are part of the whole thing.
Right, paradox reigns supreme, my friend.
Very visually driven, which is interesting, because that's like a tiny piece of what actually the universe is all about. Mm-hmm. If you think about that, only 3 to 4% of the universe is actually matter, the stuff that we're made of.
Right.
That's only 3 to 4%. Mm-hmm. And then within that, with our vision, we only see a tiny band of the visual light. So, you know, if it's only visual, then you're really limiting yourself.
I know, right? Exactly.
And maybe that's also part of being is actually allowing the other senses. And people talk about the sixth sense. Maybe the sixth sense is your first sense, but that's an interesting one to talk about. So change. I love the way that you say that. Change is actually, there is nothing but change. Everything nature shows us is change. It's just a energy form that transforms into a different energy, and that's all it is. Everything is change. So it's fundamental indeed to everything that we see. That's, I love that actually. I really, yeah. So, and what you're saying is that not changing is actually not possible. It's just by virtue of being, we are changing. I think you're right, and the evidence is there to see. With every second, you are changing. With every input you're getting, you're changing. So the last point, I wasn't sure what you were saying there. So if you can help me out there, because it did trigger me. The second point.
Sure. So there is the sort of change that is happening, right? There's there's whatever the reality is sort of showing and presenting, right? And then there's my story about, you know, what I want or what I think, or, you know, my judgments or ideas, or, you know, fear, criticism, attachment, resistance to whatever is sort of being presented by reality. And one of the one of the people I really enjoy, who I find sort of sage-like in their wisdom, is Byron Katie. And she always refers to this, that reality only wins 100% of the time, right? So the more I can line up with reality, I can get on reality's time, sort of reality's team, then, you know, the better chance I have of being on the sort of winning side, right? Whereas if I try and, just no, stop reality, stop change, right? It's just this relentless steamroller that's just like, no, that's not an option, and sort of will Oh, it's all right.
I thought I'd switched WhatsApp off, but I actually switched it on because I had to.
Right. So the sensation is actually that by standing in opposition to reality, I then create something that sort of is sort of fundamentally unsustainable, and that can be crushed, right, by the opposition, right? Whereas if I can stand with reality with no opposition, then I have a possibility to just flow however is available, right?
Yeah.
However is presented.
Okay, well, guess one could say, are you being or are you acting and reacting? So interesting. So, did I sort of catch most of it?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm in there. So, so let's just take a minute to, close your eyes, find your breath, however you want, to just land in the space, and then we'll see which way the flow wants to flow.
Great. All right.
Yeah. I'll mirror that gesture.
Interesting. The breathing, the actual process of breathing. Have you ever read Schauberger, Victor Schauberger?
No.
No, he was an Austrian forester, born I think 1895. He's actually a large part of water, but he was very much a genius in the sense that he could observe nature in a way that not many people can. And this whole process of breathing is, he actually believed that everything in nature breathes, and it's everything actually lives because it's an in-breath and an out-breath. It's the start of all the change. It's everything. Which I highly recommend reading Schauberger. So I just that the actual act of breathing is so important, is so part of living. It is life. So it just triggered me when I was consciously breathing.
Yeah, right. And I think that's one of the things that I have heard and recognized that makes breathing such a sort of interesting and unique phenomenon, because it's one of the few truly automatic processes that we can influence and actually be consciously interact with, right? In opposition to, well, I can certainly influence my digestion. I do it all the time, but the breath is this process that's happening in the background all the time, and somehow can become accessible to shift my attention to and to influence.
Yeah, it's yeah, change. I mean, change comes up immediately, but it's like becoming aware of. You have the consciousness and you have the subconsciousness, and part of who am I, discovering who am I, is, I think, becoming conscious of your unconsciousness. Literally, your consciousness is like a mini computer. It's like the random access memory.
Yeah.
Whereas your subconsciousness, which is your breathing, you're taking a route, and you go right, and you think, did I take the right route? Yes, you did, because your subconsciousness is ruling that.
Right.
And your subconsciousness is like a humongous computer. I'm sorry, I thought I had switched it off. Let me just. Oh, this is FaceTime. It's like someone's trying to get hold of me, but everything happens for a reason, I guess.
Right. The world is always present, right?
No, it's really interesting. For me, it was very interesting to find in my who am I quest, to find that the subconsciousness is literally it's a humongous computer. And it is filled with all sorts of pre-programmed stuff that actually happens in your first 7 years of life. And that set of programs determines largely who you are right now. And by recognizing that it's just a program, you can then make a conscious move to change whatever you don't like.
Right.
And rather than being a victim, you can then start taking responsibility and say, hold on a second, I'm irritated by what Jeremy says. Well, that's not your fault. It's
right.
In most cases, people don't do that. They don't consciously try to irritate others. No, it's something that's wrong in me. Yeah. It's my programming that makes me irritated.
Yeah.
And I can change that by literally looking at, why am I getting irritated? But it can only happen by becoming conscious of that unconscious programming.
Yeah.
And then you can do something about it. I mean, you had a long session with Vera, fear. And fear is another one that, I mean, fear is all about right now. If you look at reality, it's all about fear. Everything's about fear. And by becoming aware that you have a biological setup, which actually puts you into two biological modes, either growth or survival. And survival is largely driven by fear. And unfortunately, 99% of the world's population right now is 99% of the time in survival mode. They are in fear. And it's only by becoming aware biologically that you have this brainstem, which is called the reptilian brainstem. I mean, I didn't know all this stuff because it isn't being taught at university or at school. This thing, actually, it's called the reptilian brainstem because it resembles the reptilian brainstem. It's an interesting question, by the way, for your biology professors. How come I have a reptilian brainstem, whereas I'm supposed to come from the apes? But okay, that's a different topic.
I can tee off there, maybe. Speculate.
But but by becoming aware that you have this brainstem, and it's on a subconscious level, it triggers your reaction. And I was astounded this is largely by the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton that I actually became aware of this. But if something happens, the reptilian brainstem actually governs all this stuff, where you either you go for fight or flight. That's what a reptile does. It actually is in survival, so it goes for fight or flight. Now, the moment that you are in that mode, automatically the blood will be restricted from your main, from your brain, from your heart, from your main organs, and it will be temporarily, at least that's the point of it, pushed towards your extremities, because you have to fight or flight. And that's useful when you see a saber tiger, or but it's like not useful if you are doing it for 99% of the time. That literally, what it does for a small moment, it prevents you from growing. But if you're 99% in that mode, you are actually hurting yourself. You're actually, it goes against your immune system, so you're actually more susceptible to illness. And it's only by becoming aware of this mechanism that you can start doing something about it. Whereas I think I'm at the point where I've lost all fear. Because every time I went into that mode, I asked myself the question, is there a saber tiger here somewhere? No, there isn't. So why am I in this mode? Well, I don't need to be in this mode. So you can switch it off. And by practice, by becoming aware, by becoming conscious, I've managed, I think, to basically switch it off. And
that's an interesting intervention.
Yeah, but it's about taking responsibility for your own life. It's there is nothing out there, as far as I'm concerned, that you can put any blame on. I'm actually a golf player. I still love to play golf. It's my way of getting into nature. But it's a perfect metaphor for life. In golf, you cannot. Yes, you can, but it's pointless. You cannot blame anyone. There's just all you do it yourself, and I think that's why it's such a beautiful metaphor for life. It's you are responsible for your life, and whatever happens to you that's your doing. It's nobody else's doing.
Yeah, it's an important discovery, right? I think about how often I see, like, I want other people or to be responsible for my feelings, right? I want, you shouldn't have done that, right? All of my judgments kind of have this pattern that I want to externalize responsibility. Right. One of my favorite ones that happened recently is I felt like I was being misunderstood. Right. No, that's not what I meant. Right. So I externalize misunderstanding, actually. And the great innovation, as you're describing, is that recognition that, even that thing that I externalize that I think is totally out there, I can take total responsibility for, and I can take seriously, and I can go, so where is it that I'm misunderstanding myself? Actually, what am I communicating that I don't even understand, I'm not aware of, that I'm not conscious of, that's outside of this narrow focus of what I see and what I intend, what I consciously am aware of, but still is being very much present and communicated to my context. And in making that shift, then I can start to take whatever my counterpart is offering me from what they're experiencing seriously. I can go, oh wow, is that what I intended or not? Maybe not. Actually, there is a part of me that intended that very much. So what does that portion actually have to say if I allow it to be a bit more explicit, if I direct my awareness towards it? As you're sort of describing this phenomenon of awareness, or this pattern, I remember something that Otto Scharmer says. I don't know where he got it from, but I definitely remember it from him. And that is the only way to understand a system is to change it. And the only way to change a system is to make it aware of itself. right? In that shift of becoming aware of itself, then a system is automatically starts to shift, right? So I do a lot of work with groups, and I think this is in the individual context, but also in the group context, this scales like so meaningfully. But as soon as I can bring into awareness the thing that is happening, but may not be in conscious focus, then we can start to look at it and make choices and to shift that state. In that, especially in the group context, I notice my intention is sort of pulled in that direction. Um, that what is that process of becoming aware of what's happening in me and making the group also aware of that is has to do with both of us, right? It's in me and I'm in the group, so it's in the group, right? And it may be I may be the most sensitive antenna for that thing that's in the group, right? It may affect me more or less than it affects other people, but it's also in the sort of shared field that we are all a part of, and that by surfacing it, I'm doing service to not just myself as an individual, but I'm also doing important work for the group to help to shift that thing that is maybe outside of awareness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny when you say as well that this stuff is not being taught in schools, because I mean, I'm really glad that you actually remind me of that, because it's such a part of like my day-to-day experience and most of the experiences of the people that I interact with, that I kind of take it for granted, right? I just part of me assumes that everybody knows this stuff, and to be reminded that no, actually this is way outside of cognition for a lot of people is actually a really solid reminder, maybe to temper my patience.
Well, one of the most incredible things that one of the most incredible insights that I've had is that, it's like whether you talk about 9/11, 3 buildings falling, or whatever is on the table, is that I've come to the insight that it's with my awareness, wherever that awareness is on the level of awareness, allows me only to see what my awareness allows me to see. And it literally means, I mean, I'm mentioning 9/11 because it's a wonderful topic for a lot of people to because a lot of things, the actual narrative there just doesn't fit the bill if you really start looking at it from my perspective. So I have this friend who is an engineer. Now, literally, when a building drops, symmetrically into its own footprint, with the speed of gravity, I mean, frictionless, then something must have been done to the structure. There's just no doubt about that. That's simple physics. But even with, he was open-minded when I showed him a few of these, where I showed him a few videos, and but he still couldn't see it. He still could not, and that's where. It's only when you have a certain awareness. If you start revisiting books, like I read Schauberger 2 years ago, and I knew he was right, but I had a lot of trouble in explaining what he was saying. Now, 2 years later, I felt like I had to reread it, and it all makes sense. It's that's why it's very useful to revisit books, or it's because you have a different awareness level and you suddenly see things and there's absolutely no point in trying to convince anyone of anything, because they have a different awareness. It's fascinating to if you want to help people, like I said, I want to help people. In most cases, you shouldn't help. And that's one of the reasons, I think, is because you see the world the way you are. It's with your programming, with your upbringing, and that's fine. That's your truth. And there's no point in me, like, I mean, even with the whole corona thing and viruses, now I have a very different way of looking at that now than I had 6 years ago. But there's no point in me trying to point out to others, hey, look what I'm seeing. It's only when you get invited and ask for my insights, then I'll share.
Mm.
It's very once you get into, and maybe that's actually why I'm into water, because you are water. You're actually 99% of your molecules are water molecules. People are taught, and that's right, that you're about 70 to 80% of your body weight is water, but you're 99% water molecules.
Mm.
And maybe, and it's interesting that the Hopi, I learned later that the Hopi believe that we're currently in the fourth world, and we're about to transform into the fifth world. And we're not human yet. We're actually in the process of becoming true humans. We're still animalistic humans operating from the, and that's obvious to see, from the materialistic point of view, the modern.
Oh yeah.
And what they say, and I was astounded by it because I was already into water, but they said the only way that we can transform is actually by bringing water back into balance, whatever that means. And that's, I don't have to convince you of anything. If I can, if I make sure that you drink what so-called structured water or vitalized water, you will change from the inside. And I've seen it with friends. I've literally seen it in my, so that's maybe why I'm working on water.
I'm very curious to know more about this structured, vitalized water. I notice, and I definitely so. So the thing that you said that I've got like written down in like this really big text here is like my awareness allows me to see what my awareness allows me to see, and that is like, yep, ain't that about a bitch, right? that's it. Yeah, I'm sort of, I'm stuck in the tunnel, in that tunnel vision, right? And maybe I can do a really great job of expanding that tunnel, or not even expanding that tunnel, but becoming more aware of everything that's in that tunnel. But I'm stuck in that tunnel no matter what, right? The things that are just not out of that tunnel are just not in that tunnel, period. And I have the metaphor that I actually use to think about this is actually a resolution, that as my sort of awareness or my consciousness develops, that I become more, I'm able to see the world in a higher fidelity of nuance, right? So if I think about it at like digital resolution, right, there's just an 8x8 grid and this pixel is black. And as my fidelity increases, I'm actually able to see that, oh, this big black pixel that I thought was an obstacle is actually made up of a few white pixels, a few blue pixels, a few gray pixels. And the obstacle is actually only a portion of what was previously this big black obstacle. And so I'm able to navigate the world closer and more refined to what's actually going on. And at the resolution that I look at the world is the resolution I look at the world, is that's just where I'm at, and that's what I've got to work with at this time. So definitely plus oneing this idea that I can't really, I mean, on some ways I can get behind that I can't really help anybody, right? I can be a part of their process of development, but I can't really hope or imagine that they don't have to do the work of developing, so to speak, right? That is just part and parcel of the process, and where you're at right now opens up this sort of field of adjacent possibles, right? These potentialities, and certainly there's a lot of nonlinear, right? I know I've made big leaps and bounds, but I had to go back and backtrack and then re-integrate things that I sort of somehow skipped over and were very disintegrated. but this idea as well that I'm not yet human and that I'm animalistic, I can get behind, because that lines up so tightly with my experience that I'm reactive to a degree that is just blows my mind all of the time, right? It's just like yesterday I was practicing this verbal aikido, and I was just like, man, it is just so hard to stay centered. I know that this is just a role play or a game, so to speak, but I'm getting triggered left and right here, man. And there is so little I can do. No, I mean, full stop. Come back to the options. What's in my awareness is the best case scenario is I can recognize that I am triggered and I can do something about it. But the trigger is happening totally automatically, whether I like it or whether I don't.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Krishnamurti comes to mind. I'm totally not into gurus. I mean, everyone, and I think Krishnamurti was one of the ones that actually he stopped, because he said, "You don't understand it. I'm not a guru." As soon as you look outside of yourself, you've lost the plot. It's going about, that's why in spirituality you have to go inside. You have all the answers you want. It's just a matter of tapping into it. And having said that, there is value in, if I know something, if I have eyes to see that you don't, then I can, if you ask me, I can offer the information for you to discern. But it's up to you to do the work. And this is where it's all about changing yourself. And changing yourself, you will change your world. I mean, if you look at the quantum physics, literally, for me, I fully am into that. I believe my world, I'm seeing you right now, you are a reflection of me. It's actually, as far as I understand, or, if anyone says that they understand quantum physics, I think they're lying. Even the people that are in quantum physics. So for me to say that I understand quantum physics, I don't. But my take on it is that literally it's saying that human consciousness actually makes matter by focusing on with my attention on something, it will materialize. It's literally, you're in a virtual reality. Now, in that sense, then you are my mirror. It's actually my relationship with you and my relationship with all relations. And the natives, if you talk about relations, it means everything. It means a stone. It means the sun. It's everything. So my world is determined by me. It's literally, if I see something I don't like, then I should go inside and change it. But Krishnamurti said, do you have a partner, Jeremy? Yeah. Well, Krishnamurti said, and I love that, he said, try and observe your partner like you've never seen him or her before.
Yeah.
And do that every moment of the day. Then you are truly seeing your partner. And it's mind-blowing, because particularly the people that are close to you, like my wife, I've known her since 1981. And you have all these experiences, and they all go into the database. So I see her, if I don't watch myself, I see her based on all those experiences.
Yeah.
This is where you get people saying, but Jeremy, you don't like ice cream. It's based on what they know from past experience. But you might like ice cream today,
Exactly. So, it's that past experience, right?
Yeah, so it's all about,
you see through that lens, right?
And this is helpful in observing the world. I mean, I see Biden, I see Trump, I see, but I just observe it. I try to observe it without spending energy on it. There's no point. It's outside my control, and it's just a reflection of my world. What I can do is focus on the stuff that I want to make happen, and thereby change the world. but it really helped me a lot to understand that try and see everything for just what it is. Just don't, like you say, don't judge it, don't label it. Sometimes you get triggers, and when you get the trigger, you go like, all right, why did that happen?
Mm.
You can go inside and you can fix that. Some people call it cleaning up or becoming enlightened or whatever you want to call it. But in my experience, and I can only talk about my experience, it's something that's not right in you.
Mm.
And you can change that. You can change that program. You can change that trigger.
Sure. What I recognize about that is this essence of it is indicative of my relationship with whatever the said object is, right? It's not indicative of the object, but it is a very clear-cut reflection of my relationship with that thing. And I've never seen, I mean, if there is a problem, so, and let's just presume for the sake of being accessible that there are problems, they are things that exist. To me, the problems have always been in my relationships with objects, whether those be people or actual objects or happenings, occurrences, what's going on. The challenge and struggle has always been, how do I manage my relationship with that thing? Because the relationship is what actually triggers me. And it's as you bring up this notion of programming, right? Those relationships happen quite automatically, and they can be managed, right? And certainly I don't have to manage all of my relationships with all of creation. I certainly can, maybe, but in the instances where I notice that I'm pained by those relationships, right? I'm uncomfortable with that relationship. Or it leads me to do things that I don't like, that I regret, that again I have yet another challenging relationship with. It definitely pays dividends to investigate and to figure out a way to become aware of and to care for or manage that relationship in a different way.
Yeah. Well, Bruce Lipton. I mean, you have a choice. Actually, with emotions in any way, you have a choice. That is a very difficult one for a lot of people as well. It's like, I'm angry. And you're like, yeah, but you don't have to be angry. What do you mean? You don't have to be angry. It's like, I lost my father. He passed over some while ago, and I was happy. But people cannot compute those two things together. I miss him in real day life, but I was happy because I feel better when I'm happy. So I decide to be happy. And people say, but you are in total control. Well, most people are not, but you are the master of your emotions. And the easiest thing to demonstrate that is if your partner is pissed off and you just say, oh, hold on, let's laugh for 30 seconds. Consciously start laughing. And anybody that does that will feel happy after 30 seconds. Now, that's the physical proof that it is the person itself who is in control of the emotions. They're just not aware of it. They think that someone cuts them off in traffic and they get irritated. It's the person's fault. No, it's up to you. And I must confess that 6-7 years ago, I was getting irritated in traffic. First of all, by changing myself, nobody ever cuts me off in traffic anymore. So that's literally, for me, an experimental proof that because I've changed my attitude towards the world, I don't get cut off in traffic anymore. It's literally a reflection. But if someone would, do something that I have many times a day where I say, wow, I used to get irritated at this moment
Hmm.
in time, and now I just observe it and I choose to be happy. And I feel a lot better for that.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
so it's a yeah, you have the power to make it a wonderful world. I mean, COVID, you can look at it any way you want. Um, there's many things I love about it. I really do. I
Hmm.
used to work from home anyway, so but it's like it gives tremendous opportunities, and it's up to you what you want to make of it. I mean, I
Hmm.
can't change. Do I agree with the WHO, and do I agree with the principle of everybody listening to the experts? I mean, literally everybody. Um, no, but all I can do is change myself. And if someone wants to know why I'm against, taking these vaccines, they're not even vaccines actually, technically, then I'll share it. But I choose. There's so many opportunities now, and I think that's the Mastermind for Positive Change is one of those,
Hmm.
where people are coming together, and you know, reality, the way I see it, reality is literally the mirror, right? Well, the mirror is the past. You can't change the mirror anymore. It's
Hmm.
There is a tiny fraction between you watching a real life mirror and your mirror image coming up. And I think what a lot of people are doing is they're reacting to the mirror. They're trying to change the mirror. Well,
Hmm.
they're actually trying to change the mirror image,
Yeah.
but I mean, everybody knows with a real mirror, right? That
Doesn't
in order to
doesn't
do
work that way. All right.
you need to change something. So it's fascinating. There's
Yeah.
no point in being angry about where this is going. There's just no point. I know that by changing myself, by doing things positively out of love and compassion, that's what that's what will change the mirror. So I've stopped in that sense, and it's impossible, of course. You can't ignore the mirror because you're in the mirror, but I know it's just a reflection. So I just do things, and this is coming back to being. I let myself to be totally guided by what I call my inner guidance, by inner feeling. Some
Hmm.
people call it spirit, some people call it source, some people call it God. It doesn't really matter, the divine. But I've learned to listen to my inside signals. And if that says go right, I'll go right. Because by experience over the past 7 years, 8 years, I've learned that that's the right thing. In hindsight, it always proves to be the right thing, and it's not easy. It takes a hell of a lot of guts to, in this time and age, say sorry. My inner guidance says I will not take this experimental gene therapy. Let all the other people do the experiments on themselves, but I'm not going to do it. And it's literally yesterday at the golf club. I had yeah, but that's asocial. You should do it for others. And it's easy to cave in. It's easy to not be
Hmm.
yourself. It's very difficult to be yourself
Yeah.
in this system.
This so there was another topic sort of hanging in the backlog in my awareness, right? Of two things that are sort of that maybe we can find a way to intersect. So one is this idea of tribalism versus the modern world, and and also this aspect of sort of dualism, right? And so a particular dualism that you're sort of bringing up, that is sort of jumping out at me, is the individual versus the collective, right? Which is always weird, right? Because it's not really a dualism, right? But it is at the same time, right? Again, I can't escape the paradox. Um, so especially in this instance, right? So this that it's hard to really wrap your brain around, I think, the sort of evolutionary process that we are a part of, right? This way in which change sort of plays a game with itself to fight or to play with entropy, right? So entropy, this idea of moving towards chaos, and yet we see all around us that there's things very coherent and much less chaotic, right? If this is what chaos looked like, this looks very ordered for chaos, right? So the way in which evolution, right, sort of plays with itself to create these spaces of order and chaos. And so this tension between my own interest, as you're expressing it, to not take the vaccine, and the group's interest that is sort of being that the group is putting before you, and how this tension itself is also a way in which evolution plays that game of sort of continuous iteration and experimentation. Because I mean, as certain as I or they or anyone may be that this is the right path, there is also always a non-zero probability that that is not the case, right? And so that it takes both this movement of the group, as we've come to express, being, right? We are extremely interdependent. We need each other in like deeply visceral ways. And it also takes it is also a portion of the evolutionary process that somebody goes, yeah, well, the group can go wherever it wants. I'm not going to do that. And that is part of the process. Both of those things are part of the process that is what keeps us as a collective in this game of experimentation, of exploration, in development. And that in fact both of those movements are sort of required for us to sort of roll the dice, and experience the diversity of outcomes, which opens and sometimes close.
Mm-hmm. There is no right or wrong as far as I'm concerned. This is where people seem to be evil, but they're not. I mean, this is just a part of the dualistic system about heat and cold. It's just a different form of expression, and it comes back to like Schauberger. Schauberger actually was he actually said, if you really start reading it, it is truly amazing. But there is no death. Everything is continuously alive, even in death. It's just a different form of energy. It is either higher or lower energy, but it's literally matter is the lowest form of energy there is. If you look at the shamanistic or tribal Far Eastern way of looking at matter and looking at health, they literally say that, and I support that by experience, is that your body, your matter, is just an expression of the underlying energetic body. And if you're ill, if you have dis-ease, then your energetic body is out of balance. And I can fix that by looking into the energetic body. I can take the source away. What modern science does, modern science only deals with matter. It's only the 3 or 4%. That's all they can measure, because they need to measure something. And they forget that there's 96, 97% of dark energy, dark matter, what they call it now. But the essence is that the whole thing about the current state of the world is that we are taught we are different. We are individual. And that this gets back to tribal thinking and the modern way of thinking. But that's nonsense. You and I are both made of energy. And because we're made of energy, we are connected. This is why
Mm.
So why a healer, for the lack of a better word, or anyone can actually sense someone. I can be here in the Netherlands and I can sense someone in the US because we're connected. It's all energetically connected. So the whole principle of single truth, the whole principle of being an individual is an illusion. It's a total illusion. We're just different expressions of the whole. And if you look at indigenous people, tribal thinking, that's exactly how they are the smart ones. We are the dumb ones, and I'm saying that. So, but literally, they understand that there is no difference in value between a leader of the tribe and someone who does the washing. There isn't. They're both equally important. They're without one of the two, the tribe would not be whole.
Mm.
And this goes for the entire Earth. We're all connected. We think as humans that we're separate from the animals. We're not. We're just a different form of energy expression. So it's this is where talking about being, for me personally, it's about truly listening to your inner values, to your inner guidance, to truly becoming whoever you're meant to become. And just on the topic of indeed of chaos, I love having conversations, although it's rare because people tend to become angry when their belief system is undermined. But the simple fact that everything in nature is according to laws. Everything holds to laws. Well, in order to create laws, you need an intelligence. There's no way that you can have laws without intelligence. So that's, end of conversation for me. So there is an overruling intelligence that has created wherever we are now, because it abides by laws. But it's about becoming truly, and it takes guts in this system right now, and it will take more guts because things will, the way things are going, it really is getting. I do occasionally bring up the Second World War, where you have this whole nation that believed in this person, and you see parallels. You see, people are taught in this system to abide by authority. You're being taught that in school, and to listen to experts, because the expert knows. You don't. But what people forget is that the expert, how did he or she learn that? Well, by listening to another expert explaining that this is the way it is. So rather than relying on your inner authority, on your inner guidance, people are taught to go outside and listen to others. And that's why a lot of people have friction, because they feel something's wrong. But everything they've been taught, the programming that they've had, is in conflict with that. And maybe this is just about learning to have the guts. And you can only do that by experience. And this is why it's not a quick fix. I'm extremely happy right now. Extremely. I'm very balanced. But at the same time, I have these discussions with my wife about whether or not my son, who is 18 with Down syndrome, has to be vaccinated. And I know 8 years ago, I would have been distraught. I would have been, all sorts of emotions. But I'm relying on my inner guidance in anything I do. And I'm trying to observe her and respect her. And this is, again, tribal thinking. There is no truth. Again, you see the world the way you are. And that's your truth. End of story. And it's things like the talking stick, where I listen to you and you can express yourself. And I value whatever comes in. I don't judge it. It's your perspective, and I'll take it on board. In Western society, you can't even have a conversation anymore. It's like, oh, I'm right. No, we're all right. You are right from your perspective. And if something that you say triggers me, I can take it on board or I can not take it on board. But that's up to me. But I respect whoever you are. And this is difficult if you look at evil people. If you think someone's, no, they're not doing something wrong. They're just being whoever they are. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I can unequivocally get behind is this individual as expression of the whole. And what that really makes me wonder is how, like, so there's an immense creative potential is another way to describe it. If I think about this, the implications of that proposition and the current way in which the world, society, culture is organized, right? There's such a huge gap between those two, right? And I think this is somewhat reflected in the sort of relative zeitgeist. The idea of the guy who stocks the grocery store shelves is now recognized as an essential worker. Before, he was just a replaceable cog in the big machine. But then we realize, oh shit, if that guy doesn't show up, then I die, and all of the grocery store shelves are empty, and before we know it, we starting to eat each other. So, and this idea that all of the parts, or all of the people, all of the roles, all of the stuff has to get done, and that they're in the absence of anybody doing any of those things, less than all of the stuff sort of gets done, and the system, the group as a whole, suffers as a consequence of that. So that notion that all input, everyone's contribution is required, and that no contribution is not required, creates this sort of field of egalitarianism that I think is like, I don't really see that anywhere. If I look at the way the world is organized, right? This recognition that we can say that Magna Carta, civil society, all men are created equal, and I don't see how that actually is applied almost anywhere. Like, we can write it down and we can say that very easily, but I don't see how that those values are actually expressed anywhere, especially when I think about the economic systems of organization, right? The marketplace doesn't have, if I think about this statement of, all parts are needed in the whole and have equivalent value, and I think of the market, there's just like, actually, these should be way farther apart, right? They just exist almost in different realities, like a different organizing paradigm or a different set of principles that, when I put into tension with each other, create a lot of potential to figure out a way to navigate both of those differences. But right now, I don't see that first one reflected anywhere, right? So, in a way, what that brings up is this almost this sort of sense of sadness and grief, that what exists as a huge possible force for generation, which is to figure out a way to grapple with both of these, like on a collective level, like we just go, no, we just don't do, right? Whereas if we can figure out a way to put those into right relationship, or any relationship whatsoever with each other, then I literally struggle to imagine what becomes possible when I have to square both of those worlds with each other, right? When I don't, and I don't mean the opposite, which I have some sense is very present, right? I don't mean, let me take all parts are equal and make that the only organizing principle, right? And I don't mean make the market forces, my job's more important than your job, the only organizing principle. But when I really raise them both to and respect them as different ways to organize that all have their place, and one cannot or should not exist in the absence of the other, then I go, ooh, really interesting things become possible, because that leads me down a path that does not exist. So in a very concrete and a way in which that I've ever seen before. It may exist, actually. As I say that, I've become very aware that somebody's probably doing it right now, but it's like the movie John Wick sort of comes to mind, right? It's this world that exists this world that is existing underneath the world that I see and I operate in, that maybe there's tons of people actually operating in this sort of layer, right? Of potentiality, but because it's so outside of the bounds of the systems of organization that I'm accustomed to seeing and interfacing with, I just have no clue that path is even a possibility. So as we think about indigenous wisdom, I wonder what those like stone piles are that mark the path for that way of being, and what they might be.
Yeah. Well, for one thing, I work always and never. I told you that. My wife always says, you're sitting on the couch doing nothing. To do is not to do. It takes guts, but it works. It works, actually. But like in my company, Dragonfly, we got 3 partners. There's no contract. There's no legal contract. We don't have a business plan. We don't. I don't watch Dan, who's one of my 2 partners. I fully trust Dan because I know Dan is following his inner guidance. And he literally, I haven't seen him for like 2 months. I don't know what he's doing, But this is where, for some reason, it's possible, in my experience, to fully go against everything that we're taught, the dominant system, and operate in a tribal sense, because we are part of the same tribe. And I trust Peter, I trust Dan. And the main thing we do is to watch that we do it from the right perspective. And what we mean with that is that all we do now is unconditional. It's done from an unconditional perspective. It's just giving myself to, in this case, Dragonfly, but it's the same in the Mastermind. It's the same in my, and that's the most difficult. It's in your family, because in your family, those are the people that are dearest to you. But I do things unconditionally. And I think that's actually Schauberger, again, if you look at, Schauberger said there's 2 different ways of doing things in nature, in everything. That's why you have heat and cold and that. So there's 2 different forms of emotions in nature. There is the overriding motion, the form that is being used to create energy, is the centrifugal one. It's the inside to out. It's explosion. And it is accompanied by heat, resistance, and noise. Now, everything we do, whether you're talking about electricity, whether you're talking about an engine, all that is based on that type of movement. Well, that type of movement, according to Schauberger, is a degrading, life-threatening motion. And this has been going on for hundreds of years. Now, my understanding of his work now is that if I get into my car and I switch on the engine, what I'm doing is I am emitting, but in the metaphysical area, which is the chunk, it's 97 percent. Degrading energy. You can't see it, just like you can't see a radio wave.
Mm.
But that's, from my point of view, the reason why humanity seems to have been degrading. We have, if you look at, doesn't matter where you look at architecture or whatever, we can't make the stuff that we used to make. And technology seems to let us think that we are evolving, but I think we've been devolving.
Mm.
The other way of creating energy, the other motion, is the outside to in motion, the vortex. And if you look at Mother Nature, that's the predominant movement that Mother Nature uses. The blood in your veins is actually making this vortex movement. The sap in a tree makes that vortex movement. Why does water vortex out if you let it, if you pull out the stop in the sink? It's because it's the path of least resistance. It's the natural way. And again, there's always two forms in nature. And this form of outside to in is actually, it uses the power of implosion as opposed to explosion. And the power of implosion is actually 100 times bigger than explosion. And it is accompanied by silence, by coolness, and by biomagnetic attraction. So rather than creating friction, it actually attracts. And it is this motion that Schauberger said already in the 1920s or 1910s. He said, the world, because we're using the dominant use or misuse of this motion, of the degrading motion, we're heading for disaster. And literally all these, the gear that we use are actually very simple, natural technologies based on nature, looking at Mother Nature and copying that. His favorite motto was to comprehend and copy nature. And these so-called vitalizers, now we're getting into water, these, all they do is they use this natural outside to inside motion, and it transforms the actual essence of the water. And it's extremely hard for people to understand because, you know, they see water molecules come in and they see water molecules come out. But the characteristics of the water have indeed changed. And it's this, in my view, what you now see is that there's, like the Mastermind, there's more and more people who are becoming aware that the basics of what we've been taught by the system over the past hundreds of years, by the dominant materialistic system, that's part of nature. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a reflection of where we are as humanity. But more and more people are starting to understand that it's not about me. I don't need property. Why would I need property? All I would like, and I think that's part of why we're here. We're all given custodianship over whatever we're doing. It's not ours because you're going to be gone in like, 60, 70 years. It's not yours. It's part of the tribe. And you have a responsibility to take whatever is given to you and use it for the better of all. And there's a big difference between communism, which actually, if you look at the United Nations, that's literally communism, because underneath all those lovely statements and everybody's green, and there will be a small elite that will determine what is right and wrong. Well, that's called communism. And that's literally what the United Nations is all about. It'll be a very small elite that determines what's good for all. This is about tribal. This is about everybody sharing. This is about everybody being important. And there's a huge difference in the two. And again, as a petroleum engineer, I'm supposed to be one of the smarter ones in Holland. Well, I was one of the dumbest ones. I literally feel that way. There's there's a very nice, there was a TEDx by a company that was asked by NASA to, they were asked to test the creativity of astronauts because they have to be very creative when they're on their own. And the amazing thing that came out of the study was that they had to test the study. Of course, I mean, they had to test the test. So they started with 5-year-old kids, and you know, I don't know the exact numbers. You would have to watch the TEDx, but literally 5-year-old kids that haven't gone to school, and they tested about 98% genius on the level of creativity. Then they looked at 12-year-olds, 32% creativity. Then they looked at 18-year-olds, 12% creativity. And then the creme de la creme, Technical University Delft, 3% creativity. So our system, and this is where I've come to realize that our system, doesn't matter whether you look at food, medical, finance, you know, the system is upside down, and the people within the system, they're wonderful, and they don't realize that they're in a system that is broken. They just simply don't realize. Well, people are starting to wake up a little bit now. So, and that's the good
for sure. For sure. I think there's definitely a growing awareness and a yearning for a different way of being, to come back to that topic, right? There's a growing hunger for recognition that, yeah, I mean, it's you know, talking about this cycle, you know, so as you describe this inside out and outside in, I come back to breath, right? I come back to respiration, right? I can see this idea that, you know, in good times, right? In good times, which actually do mirror this aspect of outside in, this growing of abundance, right? That in good times, then there's no problem with the way of being, right? When I have more and more and more. But in bad times, when I'm in the crux of this, getting less and less and less and less, right? When the exhalation is intense, then I go, oh shit, I don't know if I can do this anymore, right? And I'm trying to sort of grasp with this metaphor, right, of inhalation and exhalation. And what I can also see is this notion of degradation, right? That, as you describe, inside out, right? When I am exploding, right? I'm taking the bonds, like literally, I'm taking the molecular bonds of these complex carbons, and I'm tearing them apart. So all of the energy that went into creating this literal, like this stuff of complexity, right? I'm taking that and I'm just tearing it to shreds and going, yeah. I don't need all of that complexity. I just need the heat, right? That's all I need. All I need is this little bit, right? And I produce all of these byproducts, all of these things that I don't consider, all of these externalities that I don't really have any consideration for, because it's not the thing I'm actually going for, but do have consequences. And then when you describe this idea of the vortex, this inside or this outside in motion, I am sort of reminded of like this, coming back to this idea of, if I can get in right relationship with reality, if I can get in, then there is this fluidity, right? The best term that I've heard to describe it is this sense of, I don't row, but I've heard of this sensation of swing that rowers get into, this sort of effortless motion in which it's just sort of doing itself. And this recognition that, as I follow this flow of outside in, it has that quality, this path of least resistance is, I think, what you said about it, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely. I mean, interesting thing about that, you know, this is the shortest path, and this is extremely interesting. If you look at matter, we're all taught to think in direct lines. That's what we see, right? That's what matter is all about.
Yeah.
And this is where in your life where you feel you go nowhere, but as long as you follow your guidance, as long as it feels good, then you're actually on that fastest path. But it doesn't become immediately obvious in the material world. And this is why it's extremely, I mean, it's very hard for people to grasp these things.
Grokking nonlinearity is I'm make a translation. So what I understand as you describing the spiral, I think of as nonlinearity, right? Network effects, power laws, this way in which shit just sort of happens that I had a really hard time predicting, but going this very long roundabout way, 10 is just, when you say it's the path of least resistance, I think that I can really get behind, because I'm just taking these little baby steps just based on what's available and what is the most accessible for me in a lot of contexts. I guess I'm personalizing this. And taking those baby steps ends up creating this huge detour around what may be a very direct route full of obstacles, full of challenges and adversity that, I just look at it, right? I just think about it, think about a traffic jam. I just look at that and go, do I want to go that way? And I go, nah, let's take the scenic route, because that's wide open. It'll take me I'll have to go farther to get there. But the experience of going farther qualitatively just feels so much more, look at that, look at the horizon over there. What a beautiful sunset. We could be stuck in gridlock with everybody else, or we could go, take this very, I don't know, intuitive is what comes to mind for me, right? Because, I'm just sort of following this thing in my gut. It's just going, no, yeah, right? And following that path is definitely very non-linear. And I think, and when I think about this sort of challenge that we're sort of put upon, is in a world in which is like hell-bent on ramming through some form of change into this total clusterfuck, right? How do I communicate to folks? Yeah, and I guess this comes back to what you said about I can't really help. I can't communicate to folks that are hell-bent on being a part of that cluster, that I'm going to take this route and I'm going to get there faster. All I might be able to do is when they go, hey, where are you going? I can go, I'm going this way. You want to come? Right. And that even trying to explain the basis for my confidence in the decision to go this way is probably more complexity than, it's probably going to communicate way more nuance that is going to do them any good at the same time.
Here's the thing. I mean, this is where, if you have a child, right? A child is, all senses are full on. What we call the sixth sense, which to me is the first sense, is still full on. This is why a child will say, Mama, I see a ghost in my room. And Mama says, no, dear child, there are no ghosts. So the child learns to discard those feelings and becomes a fully rationally based person. Everything we do is rational, logic. But the essence is that if you don't feel it, you don't get it. You have to feel it. And there is no way that you can rationalize a feeling. So, and this is where I think, again, in indigenous people, in tribal people, they fully allow people to say, if they feel that they shouldn't do it, then that's fine, because that's your truth, and that's the most important thing. And in our world, we try to rationalize. I mean, if you look at a soccer game or whatever, how did it feel when you scored the goal? You cannot rationalize feelings. It's paradoxical. There's no way. There's no way. So, and that makes it very hard, because you have to, I mean, if you say, I have to go left, and someone will ask why, and then you have to rationalize it. Well, you don't. You just have to say, that's how I feel. And I find the more you allow people to be, coming back to being, to be truly themselves, i.e., reacting to making their actions based on their feelings, rather than the system, the outside system, and the rationality of that, then things will suddenly, magical flow starts to be. Things will go without friction. But the other thing is, this is experiential. So you first have to have the guts to do it. And it takes time. This is where what the natives say, the walking the narrow path, is walking the narrow path of really being me, really following my own path. And it's narrow, it's very narrow, and it's full of tricks, and it's full of risks. But
room for only one, right?
The more you do that, the less friction you will see. Although your ratio will go like, that can't be. And I've seen it happen in my life now, where by not doing certain things work-wise, actually things happen that I could never have thought possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I can for sure get behind that. Yeah. And then I just come up with yet again like this. I don't know how to describe it other than sadness of this potentiality that exists in putting these things back into relationship with each other. And I think of like all of the, if I contemplate my enemy, it may be too heavy of a word to put on it, but if I think about what I'm up against, right, this desire for predictability and control, and for and to sort of to know ahead of time the outcome of this long and winding path, and the ability to walk this long and winding path, then all I come up with is I wonder, right? I wonder to what extent I can, to come back to this idea of, using my gifts or my medicine, right, towards the greater good of the whole, right? I wonder to what extent I can continue to walk that path in this context and become an agent is the word that comes up, but I think it's that it contains much more than that. It contains this idea of an inspiration, subversion it plays into it, to open the possibility, somehow open the possibility space for those, like, earnestly, right, because I imagine there's good faith there, right, to really be earnestly be in the throes of, no, this is what I need, and to go, awesome, and there's another possibility, right? So I guess we're coming to some red blue pill shit here. Maybe this is a pretty interesting place to sort of wrap up. Yeah. And to, at the end, to offer what is legitimately a very interesting beginning to folks.
Maybe, yeah. No, it's but this is where I'm actually very optimistic. And although it might, gosh, there's so much wrong in the system, but I'm extremely optimistic. It's and if I look back like 6 years ago, where indeed I started trying to help others who didn't ask for my help, it doesn't work that way. But if I see how people and that's all I can do is be in wherever I am. That's what I can do something about.
Mm.
There's a lot of change. There's a lot of people that are becoming aware what's more important and what's not important. And unfortunately, through suffering, we learn the hardest lessons. But it's come to the stage where I no longer suffer, because what I used to call suffering is, I now know that even if I'm in such an experience, it's up to me whether I suffer or not.
Mm.
And literally, I totaled my car, and I used to have, probably I would have thought terrible things, and so bad that it happened, and I didn't have a lot of money, blah blah blah. But I just looked at it and thought, okay, this is happening for a reason, and I'll find out what the reason is.
Mm.
And this is truly who I am right now, is through all the experiences that I've had in my life. Not one of them, if I would have missed one instance of all those experiences, I would not be the person who I am. And this is where, in modern Western thinking, you fail if you go bankrupt. You fail if you fail your test. No, it's an experience that builds you. And I happen to believe that that experience is the best thing that can happen to you. Otherwise, it would not happen to you.
Mm.
It's just up to you whether you want to take the lessons from it. And if you start being trustworthy, if you start trusting others, lo and behold, you'll meet loads of people that are trustworthy. If you look at the world and say, there's a lot of people that are out to get me, there's a lot of people that are out to steal from me, you'll find that a lot of people will steal from you. And in that sense, it's literally a reflection of your own being.
Mm. Yeah. So thank you very much, Hans, for bringing back that sense of creative potential that comes from bringing these things into relationship with one another. Right. Yeah. That's I can definitely find that sense of optimism that you're describing, because there's, in the big scheme of things, because the difference is so big, that just means that there's a lot of good work that is possible. Right? There's a lot of good work to be done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you for a lovely conversation. I mean, this is what life is all about. This,
Right.
what's important, this.
Yeah.
And how many people have meaningful conversations? So few. And so
Well,
thank you for that.
yeah, thank you for one. Yeah, putting one in the books with me. Yeah,
And we need to talk
appreciate
about
it.
water, but that'll be on the record. That'll be on the record.
Yeah, all right. All right. Well, thanks for your time and attention, Hans. I'll see you on Wednesday. And thanks for everybody who's hanging out with us. Huh?
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Bye, Jeremy.
Safe journeys. Well, folks, that was my dude Hans. Thanks for your time, attention, and energy. If you would be so good as to post a frame in the comments, timestamp it with, and let us know any particular thought that arose in response to that moment, a feeling that you had, or a physical sensation. Let us know what was going on in your body at that moment in time. And thanks for riding the wave of being with us. Again, my name is Jeremy Nathaniel Akers. This has been the Gospel of Change, and gushes.